Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really huge question, one that's been around forever, really.
Yeah.
What happens to our consciousness when we die?
Mm-hmm. It's fundamental.
Yeah, and forget the quick answers. We want to, properly explore some specific ideas, looking at it through the lens of idealism.
Right.
Our mission is to dig into arguments suggesting consciousness, well, maybe it doesn't just stop when the body does.
Exactly. And the material we're looking at, it really challenges those everyday assumptions we have about reality, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
We'll look at why this sort of standard view, physicalism and also dualism, why they hit some pretty big roadblocks.
Especially with certain physics findings, right?
Precisely. And then we'll get into idealism, which flips it and says consciousness is actually the foundation.
Okay.
So the goal is to unpack how that view tackles the question of consciousness after death.
Yeah.
And hopefully do it in a way that's, clear and engaging.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start with the usual suspect then, physicalism. The idea that basically the physical stuff came first.
Right. Material world, yeah.
And consciousness just sort of emerged from complexity, like brains.
Mm-hmm.
But then you hit that wall, the one David Chalmers called the hard problem. How do you get feeling, subjective experience, this inner movie?
The what it's like.
Yeah, what it's like to be us, just from physical bits and pieces, neurons firing.
It's a huge gap. And think about Greg Rosenberg's point. When you boil the physical down to basics, ultimates, he calls them.
Right.
What you're describing are just patterns, relationships, bare differences. But how do patterns of difference suddenly become the taste of coffee?
Right. Or the feeling of sadness.
Exactly. No matter how complex the pattern, it doesn't seem to logically entail that qualitative richness. There's something missing in that explanation.
It really feels like there is. It's like, yeah, knowing the recipe doesn't explain the experience of eating the cake.
Good analogy.
And then there's the other main view, dualism. Mind and body are separate things.
Which feels intuitive for many people.
It does, especially thinking about surviving death. But dualism has its own major problems too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The big one, again highlighted by Chalmers, is the interaction problem.
Okay.
If mind and body are totally different kinds of stuff, mental and physical, how on earth do they affect each other?
How does my non-physical thought make my physical hand move?
Exactly. Or how does physical heat become the mental feeling of warmth? And then there's the idea of causal closure.
You mean that physical events seem to only have physical causes?
Precisely. If the physical world is a closed system in terms of cause and effect, where does a non-physical mind poke in to make things happen? It's very difficult to explain.
Okay, so both physicalism and dualism have these pretty fundamental issues.
They do.
And this is where the ground starts to shift a bit because the material also brings in quantum physics.
Yes, and this is where it gets really counterintuitive for our everyday experience.
These experiments, they seem to suggest that observing reality isn't just passive looking.
Not at all. It suggests observation might actually be involved in determining what reality is.
Which kind of messes with the idea of a world just sitting out there, completely separate from us observing it.
Totally. You look at the work starting with Aspect and then later experiments by Groblacher, Romero, Lapkevitz, and many others.
Yeah.
They've really pushed on this.
Pushed on what exactly?
On the implications of assuming a reality independent of measurement. And the results are consistently weird. Properties of quantum systems seem, well, undefined until they're measured.
Undefined.
Or at least it seems meaningless to talk about them having definite values before measurement. Some physicists are quite explicit about this.
And wasn't there something even stranger about the present affecting the past?
Ah, yes, the delayed choice experiments, like the one by Kim and colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
It suggests that a measurement choice made now can seemingly influence the state of a system before that choice was made.
Wow. Okay. That's hard to wrap your head around.
It absolutely is. And it leads some thinkers, like Richard Kahn Henry, to make pretty bold claims.
Like what?
Like his statement, the universe is entirely mental. The idea is that our strong intuition of a separate material world might actually be the illusion.
So these physics results, they don't necessarily prove idealism, but they certainly shake the foundations of physicalism and maybe even dualism.
They absolutely create serious tension with those views. They open the door, you could say, to considering alternatives where consciousness plays a more fundamental role.
Okay, so if physicalism is shaky, what's the alternative we're focusing on? Idealism. Let's define that clearly, because it's not about, being optimistic.
Right, not in the everyday sense. In philosophy, idealism means phenomenal consciousness, subjective experience. The what it's like is the fundamental reality.
The bedrock.
Exactly. Everything else, including what we call the physical world, exists within consciousness, not outside it.
And the specific version we're exploring from Bernardo Kastrup adds another layer to this.
Yes, his model proposes a universal consciousness. Think of it as a vast underlying field of awareness.
Okay. So where do we fit in, our individual consciousness?
We arise, in his view, through a process of dissociation within that universal consciousness.
Dissociation, like...
Like the way distinct personalities or alters can form in dissociative identity disorder, DID. It's an analogy, of course.
Wow, okay, so we're like localized whirlpools or alters within this bigger ocean of consciousness.
That's a good way to picture it. And there's a boundary around each alter. He uses the term Markov blanket from neuroscience and physics.
A Markov blanket, like a membrane.
Sort of, yeah. It's the interface.
Yeah.
Our sense perceptions, then, are basically the universal consciousness impinging on that boundary, information flowing across it.
Okay, that's a radically different picture. So what about our bodies, our brains? Physicalism ties consciousness so tightly to the brain.
In Kastrup's idealism, the brain and body aren't the source of consciousness. They are the image or the extrinsic appearance of that dissociated conscious process.
The extrinsic appearance, meaning how our inner life looks from the outside.
Exactly. How that localized conscious activity appears when viewed from across the dissociative boundary within the universal consciousness.
Ah, so that's why brain activity correlates so strongly with what we experience.
Precisely. The brain scan isn't showing the cause of the feeling. It's showing the external picture of the feeling happening within that alter.
It just represents the inner life.
It's a representation, a dashboard display, if you will, of the inner experiential states.
That actually provides a neat explanation for the correlation without saying the brain creates the consciousness.
It does. It reframes the whole relationship.
So how does this idealist view handle those other problems we mentioned? Like, why do we all seem to share the same world? If it's all in consciousness, why isn't it just my private dream?
Well, if we are all alters dissociated within the same universal field of consciousness.
We're surrounded by the same mental environment.
Exactly. We're all grounded in and interacting with the same underlying transpersonal phenomenality. So naturally, we perceive a shared reality, just like characters in the same story share the same setting.
Okay, that makes sense within the model. What about the laws of nature? Why can't I just decide to float if reality is mental?
Because your individual volition, your personal will, is part of your dissociated alter.
It's contained within the boundary.
Right. It's localized.
Yeah.
You are dissociated from the broader dynamics and regularities of the universal consciousness.
Which we perceive as.
Which we perceive as the impersonal, fixed laws of nature. Our individual will operates within those larger patterns, but doesn't control them, because it's only a small, separated part.
So the laws feel external and fixed because they belong to the larger consciousness we're separated from.
That's the idea. It explains the consistency and apparent objectivity of the physical world from within an idealist framework.
Okay, so we've laid out this idealist picture. Universal consciousness, where dissociated alters, the body is an image. Let's bring it back to the big question, death. What happens then, according to this view?
Well, think about what death represents physically, the dissolution of the body, the brain stopping.
Right, the image disappears.
If the body is the image of the dissociation, then the end of the body signifies the end of the dissociation.
Meaning the boundary dissolves.
Exactly. The alter reintegrates with the universal consciousness it arose from.
So it's not an end of consciousness.
Quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Potentially. Idealism suggests it might be an expansion, a regaining of memory, identity, emotional scope that was limited or lost when the alter formed.
Lost at birth, perhaps, when the dissociation happened.
That's the implication. Death isn't annihilation, but a return, a broadening of awareness, emerging back into the source.
That is profoundly different from the lights-out scenario of physicalism.
Radically different. It suggests conscious inner life continues, perhaps in a vastly expanded form.
And the source material mentions some, well, suggestive evidence. Not proof, but hints.
Right. Things like near-death experiences, NDEs. People report feeling their consciousness expand beyond their body. Heightened awareness, immense connection.
Like Anita Moorjani's account you mentioned.
Exactly. She described feeling greater and more intense and expansive than my physical being. That kind of report aligns surprisingly well with the idealist prediction of what happens when the dissociative boundary starts to dissolve.
It's certainly evocative. What about psychedelic states? How do they fit in?
Well, some studies show that certain psychedelics can reduce specific kinds of brain activity.
Reduce, not increase.
Yes, reduce activity in areas associated with the ego or sense of self, while people simultaneously report incredibly expanded states of awareness, ego dissolution unity.
Huh. Less brain activity, more subjective
In
experience.
certain ways, yes. So the suggestion is that these states might chemically induce a temporary loosening of that dissociative boundary.
Like a sneak peek.
Perhaps a glimpse into what the early stages of the dissociation ending like in death might feel like. That sense of merging, of expanded reality, echoes the NDE reports and the idealist model.
So, pulling it all together, idealism offers this narrative where individual consciousness is temporary,
A temporary localization within a universal field.
and death is the collapse of that localization, leading not to nothingness, but to reintegration and maybe expansion.
Precisely. It presents a coherent alternative to physicalism and dualism, addressing some of their key problems.
Like the hard problem, interaction, the shared world.
Right. And it offers a framework where consciousness continuing after death isn't just wishful thinking, but a logical consequence of the underlying ontology.
This deep dive has certainly given us a lot to chew on if this idealist view holds any water.
Mhm.
It just explodes the questions, doesn't it? What is this universal consciousness? What's its nature? And if reintegration is an expansion, what does that even mean? What possibilities exist beyond our current limited viewpoint? It really reframes everything about life and reality.
It pushes us to contemplate the very ground of being, doesn't it? Beyond the individual self we normally identify with, what is the nature of that larger reality we might be part of?
Huge questions. Definitely leaves you thinking.
It certainly does. It's a perspective that invites ongoing reflection on life, death, and consciousness itself.
Well, thank you for joining us on this exploration. We really hope it sparks some thoughts, and we encourage everyone listening to keep pondering these ideas and what they might mean.